Good morning everyone and welcome to my channel on 2 and 4 wheels. Top level cycling ends on the 18th of September and it's time to bring an overview of the different teams involved in the relegation battle since La Vuelta, starting with Movistar and ending with Israel Premier Tech. I've been doing a series on this topic in the Spanish channel since I started it. If you wanna check it out, I'll update it with English subtitles. Despite the report that the UCI could make a 20-team World Tour for 2023 and all the criticism from teams and threats of legal action that we will see in this video, the UCI confirmed its initial plans to have a World Tour composed of 18 teams for the 2023-25 cycle and that they will only make some small adjustments to the scoring of certain races. Before we start, don't forget to leave a comment with the team you think will join Israel in the second division. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's go with the teams. We start this review with the big winner of the last month, Movistar. The Tour de Limousine victory by Aramburu started a trend that hasn't stopped since for the Spanish team. I didn't see Movistar capable of responding at such a high level and of being in the comfortable position they are in at the moment, but hey, I'm happy for them and for Spanish cycling. Obviously, we have to start with Enric Mas' Volta España. The Spaniard didn't have high hopes at the start, but he quickly saw himself as one of Renko's biggest threats and one of the strongest riders in the race. His performance, completely unexpected by Unzue, and the results obtained by Valverde and the rest in the GC delivered close to 1,000 points for the team, a great result. But we must also highlight at the same level the alternative calendar, in which they have taken even more points. Gonzalo Serrano woke up after a disappointing season and took third in Wallonie and the victory in the Tour of Britain, which was reduced to 5 stages after the death of Elizabeth II. Max Canter has done very well with 2 podiums in the Primus Classic and Goyche-Pigil. Cortina took 300 points between his 5th in Quebec and 11th in Worlds. Aramburu got his share of points in Ploé, Montreal or Tuscany, where Rubio was 4th although he is outside the top 10 of the team, and Pedrero and Sosa were in the top 10 of the overall in the Deutschland Tour. All this puts Movistar 1,300 points ahead of Lotto Soudal, a very comfortable margin, so much so that Raúl Banqueri only gives the team a 0.3% chance of dropping, and the Twitter account, A Cuánto Está Movistar del Descenso, has now decided to worry about the gap between Movistar and DSM for 13th place and to support EF in the relegation fight by popular choice. The Spanish team will go to the Italian Classics and Langkawi to certify their stay in the World Tour for the next 3 years, after a 2020-2022 cycle in which, although they have responded wonderfully well in the last month, they made things difficult for themselves, and that's something we can't forget. We continue with BikeExchange, the team that, together with Arkea, has ridden less races, 12 since the end of August. The truth is that after Simon Yates' withdrawal due to COVID in La Vuelta, which sparked tremendous noise on Twitter for all the points they have lost these last 2 years in January with the absence of the Australian calendar, and although Groves got the victory the same day of Yates' departure, the poor performances of the team in Ploé affected by crashes and Maryland, where they were the only World Tour team that could not take advantage of the low level of the rivals, the situation of the team was really alarming, just over 300 points ahead of Lotto Soudal. This prompted further criticism from Sport Director Matt White of the UCI system, emphasizing the unfair distribution of points and how appropriate it would be to have 20 teams in the World Tour if those 20 had the budget to be in the category. Fortunately for him, the world champs and the 2 leaders who have been active, Groenewegen and Matthews, lifted the team in a matter of 2 weeks. Starting with Worlds, Matthews scored 400 points by finishing 3rd in the road race, and in the mixed relay they added another 170 thanks to Sobrero and Matthews with Darbridge. Matthews also finished 2nd in Quebec, another 400 points for the team. That's a total of 1,000, to which must be added Groenewegen's in the Belgian and French classics for sprinters, 2 seconds, 2 thirds and a 5th place, another 425 points. Dylan, after finishing 3rd in the Kampioenschap van Vlaanderen, confessed that he loves racing in Belgium but that the point system is useless. The team's farming of points has been so good that they currently sit close to 1,300 points ahead of Lotto, and Banqueri gives them a measly 1% chance of relegation. Finally, the remainder calendar, which by the way is still out of date on their website, includes the collection of Italian classics and a couple in France, Belgium and Germany. It's not the most extensive, but given their lead in the rankings and the level of their leaders, they'll get it done with a couple of good results. Now is the turn of EF Education-EasyPost, which has done quite well adding races at the end of the season in which, taking advantage of the greater freshness of some of its riders due to injuries and illness in the spring and so on, EF is in a situation of relative tranquility, just over 1,000 points above Lotto Soudal. The best results have been in Worlds, with Bisigers 225 points in individual time trial and the mixed relay, and Betios 150 thanks to his 8th place on the road, who took another 125 in Quebec. We have to highlight also the Vuelta a España with Uran's 280 points thanks to his 9th place in the overall and the stage win, Guerreiro's podium in the Deutschland Tour, and Chavez 5th in Tuscany. The Maryland Classic and the Coppa Sabatini were two other races in which, although tactically they were not brilliant, they took a good bag of points, 280 in each of them, with Cord, Paules, Aikin, Chavez and their new signing, Andrea Piccolo, who entered the top 10 thanks to his 3rd place in the Coppa Agostini. A pity for the team that the Memorial Marco Pantani was cancelled due to heavy rains. This good performance in the two stage tours, Worlds and the Italian Classics, unlike Fourmies and the Belgian Classics, except for the 7th place of Van der Berg in Wallonie, puts them in a very good situation, and Raoul Van Kerry only gives them a 1.4% chance of dropping to 19th place. It shouldn't be surprising if they score several hundred more points in the remaining Transalpine Wander races with the full squad available. That will be enough for them and whatever they can get in the rest and Langkawi, and so voters won't have to worry about the risk of relegation in terms of the contracts with riders and sponsors, a relegation to the 2nd division, which for him, in cycling, is the death of a team. It's time now for the two French teams in the fight, Cofidis and Arkea Samsic, who are in 17th and 18th place, the last two spots that give access to the World Tour. We start with Cofidis, which, according to Procycling Stats, is 70 points ahead of Arkea and 1,000 ahead of Lotto. Cofidis is the team that has scored the most points with its top 10 cyclists, and its chances of dropping to 19th place are minimal, with a 5% chance according to Van Kerry. As for the World Tour races, they only did good in the Vuelta a España, with the victory and 3rd of Ferrara and the 2nd of Cocard on the day of Montilla, because Martin did what he could to top 25s in Canada, although he performed much better in the Italian Classics in mid-September. Another rider who continues to give points to the team consistently is Benjamin Thomas, who only knows one possible result in all the races he has ridden after Polynormand, the top 10, achieved in Plouay, Doubs and Luxembourg, although his failure in a time trial deprived him of a podium in the stage race. We can also highlight Consoni's victory in the Paris-Chauny and his 7th in the Primus Classic, Allegard's 4th in the Goix-Pijl, and we could go on giving more results of this style, because the trickle of top 10s that Cofidis has achieved in every race in which they had competed in this period, seasoned with a couple of podiums and victories, is just what they needed. And the trend is likely to continue in the final races of the season, appearing in all but the Tour of Croatia. In their favor is the versatility of their squad, with numerous sprinters like Consoni, Cocard or Allegard, people like Martin or Herrada for the Italian Classics, and Single or Thomas. It's a very valuable top 10 of cyclists that has led them to a salvation that we can 100% guarantee. Let's go with the other French team, Arkea Samsic, who, if it wasn't for Lotto's slowdown, maybe, and only maybe, could have ended up missing Quintana's points in the Tour. Right now, they are 900 points ahead of the Belgians and close to Cofidis. Arkea's performance in the last month has been solid, but they have competed in fewer races than other teams because they didn't make the trip to Italy in mid-September, for example. Looking at the results, Vauquelin took 2 second places in the overall in Luxembourg and Poitou-Charentes thanks to his skill in the time trial. Capior and Louvel were 3rd in Fourmies and Doubs respectively, and the Belgian took other honorable spots, such as 6th in Isbergues. If you add to that Hofstetter's 4th in Chauny and Barguil's 3 top 10s in Canada and Wallonie, well, hey, not so bad, as they only missed the top 10 in Plouay and Hautland. The team has done a good job and that's taking into account that Buani has been out since April and Nairo decided not to take part in the Vuelta, where he would have scored even more points for the team, which only took 36 with McLeay in Stage 3 and Jesbert in the GC. Despite the fact that, as of 28th of September, Arkea's remaining calendar is more reduced than that of the rest, perhaps because they haven't been invited to some races, as Bancheri says, or because they don't want to make the long trips to Japan and Langkawi, a terrible debacle would have to happen for Arkea not to join Alpecin as the second division team that will be promoted to the World Tour for the next 3 years. The first team in serious trouble and most likely to be relegated is Lotto Soudal. Right now they are 900 points away from relegation, too many to mount a comeback with 21 days to go before the end of the season. Lotto's strategy at this phase was very clear: forget about the stage races and bet everything on the Belgian and French classics. In September they only took part in one-day races, 15 of them. Andreas Kron did well in Italian classics after the fatigue syndrome that has plagued him since the end of the tour. The only two stage races in which they competed were the Vuelta a España and the Deutschland Tour. Let's not even talk about the former, in which Kras abandoned on the second day, while in the latter, Ewan took a sprint victory after a 4-month-long drought and Monique finished 7th overall. Let's move on to the Belgian and French classics. If the performance had been as good as in August, with the victory of Campenards in Leuven, the 300 points in the Eurometropole, or the Lys victories in Charles and Egmont, they would be in a position to save themselves right now. After Poulet, they were only 400 points behind Movistar, BikeExchange and EF, but they haven't kept up. They have some good results, true. The Lys, 4th in Plouet, his 2nd in Houtland, Ewan's victory in Formies or his 2nd place in the Kampioenschap van Vlaanderen are good results, but in the rest of the races, the best result is the Lys' 5th place in Paris-Chauny after having to start his sprint from a long way. The Lys got stuck in the sprint of the Goyche-Pijl and finished 6th. They placed 3 riders in the top 15 of Wallonie, although the best, the Boist, finished 9th, Gilbert was 8th in Doubs, and they suffered a debacle in the Primus Classic. These results have made Raoul Bancheri go from giving Lotto a 32% chance of relegation on September the 12th to 80% on September 26th. Even if they perform wonderfully well in some Italian classics plus Lombardy and Langkawi, plus what Ewan and the Lys achieve, they would need the Arkea or Cofidis riders to forget biking in order to be saved. Lotto is being hurt by a couple of things. The first is the increased competition in the .Pro and .1 semi-classics, as they haven't normally faced the likes of Van der Poel, Groenewegen or Philipsen in this. The second is the obvious lack of a serious mountain GC contender, and they have been very unlucky lately, as C1 fell ill in the night before the Berges GP and still hasn't returned. The Lys crashed in the final kilometers of Formies, although it was the fault of Roger Kluge, and Gonzalo Serrano's crash in the Primus Classic deprived them of a win with the Lys. If you add to that the strange palpitations that Tim Wellen has suffered and the domestic accident of Sylvain Moniquet a couple of days ago, that's it. But bad luck is always a factor to be taken into account, and it will hit teams as it comes. So with all this, and however much Ewan promises to fight to the end, however much Kras returns in the Japan Cup, and however much logistical effort Lotto makes participating in 4 races on October 16th, it is the second team that will lose World Tour status for the 2023-25 cycle. And we finish this review with a team that no matter what they do is doomed and has been for some time now, Israel Premier Tech. They are currently almost 2,000 points behind Arkea, the team that marks the salvation. According to Raoul Bancheri, their chances of salvation are down to 0.02%, and the relegation will most likely mean that they will not receive mandatory invitations to the World Tour stage races, as TotalEnergies and all their rivals, including EF, have scored more points this year. That's why some of its members have been very active in criticizing the relegation system, starting with the team's owner, Canadian-Israeli billionaire Sylvain Adams, who claimed that relegation is dead and demanded that the UCI increase the World Tour from 18 to 20 teams because of the exceptional nature of the pandemic, or he will go to court by force majeure. We also have the view of the rider, Michael Woods, who called for an end to the relegation system, emphasizing the carbon footprint effect of the extensive programs of the teams fighting to avoid relegation. He also criticized the scoring of minor races and how this system encourages a bizarre way of racing. And we finish with the team's bike supplier, Factor, whose contract with the team ends this year and are in negotiations to renew it. Their CEO lamented the team's relegation, but even more so the possibility that they will not be invited to the Tour de France next year, which will be a big loss in terms of brand exposure. We move on to the team's results, and frankly, they have shown in very few races, with Seb Van Mark's win at the Maryland Classic being the highlight. As for the World Tour races, Woods continued his bad luck by dropping out of the Vuelta, and the team could only salvage a second place from Impey, who is not even in the team's top 10. Nitzola and Fuslan didn't do much in the Canadian Classics, and the best employee was Clark's 38th place. Teuns Revolsave was almost nothing, standing out only in the Tour of Britain and Wallonie, and he's not even in the top 10 of the team. He also wasn't selected by Belgium for the World's Road Race. Two who have recently made the top 10 are Guillaume Boivin, thanks to his 5th place in the Primus Classic, and Corbin Strong, who surprised everyone in Great Britain, 6th overall and a stage win, and Wallonie. Looking at the team's performance in the rest of the races, one can see how they are in this situation. Since the start of the Vuelta, their other best result is a 10th place in the Goyche for Van Asbroek, who is not in the top 10 either. And if the best you can achieve is a top 20, if for Mies, Tuscany, Paris-Chauny, Houtland or Slovakia, then you are ready for relegation. And here's the remaining calendar, but come on, it's a mere formality, because whatever they do, they're already out of the World Tour, and Fuslan has already let it slip that he might not continue in the team if he gets relegated and they make him ride minor races. And with Israel Premier Tech, we have reached the end of this video, the update of the relegation fight and the World Tour licenses for the 2023-25 cycle. See you in a couple of days with a new edition of the Cycling Bulletin, in which we will comment on all the news of the last week except for Van der Poel's travels in Australia, which I might do a full video on later, as new details and statements are coming out day by day. Let me know if you would like me to do it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and see you next time!